Good morning, and I'd like to welcome everybody to this launch event. My name is Emma Reynolds. I'm the Managing Director for Public Affairs Policy and Research at the City UK, and I'm here to welcome everybody to the meeting. And I will hand over in a few short moments to the Chairman of our Legal Services Group, James Palmer. But I'm delighted to welcome you all to this virtual event, which marks the launch of the City UK's 2021 Legal Services Report. And I'd particularly like to give a warm welcome and a huge thank you to the Chancellor of the High Court, the Right Honourable Sir Julian Flaux, and indeed the Parliamentary Under Secretary of State at the Ministry of Justice, Lord Wolfson of Tredegar, QC. We know that you have very busy schedules, and we're really delighted that you've taken the time to be with us today for the launch of our flagship legal services report. I'd also like to thank James Palmer and indeed the City UK's Scott Devine for all the work they put into this report and for all the work that they do throughout the year in representing our legal services members to the highest levels of government and indeed the judiciary. So this year's edition is the 10th Legal Services Report, and it sets out the hugely significant contribution of the legal services sector to our economy and indeed to our competitiveness and to the UK's ongoing success as one of the world's leading international financial centres. And as those of you who will know on the call, the City UK represents that broader UK-based financial and related professional services ecosystem, and our legal services members come from across the legal spectrum, including from law firms, the bar, and many in-house counsel. And I'd like to take this opportunity to thank them for their contributions to this report, to our legal services output throughout the year, and to the City UK's Legal Services Group as well. And I'd like to thank many of our other stakeholders who provide data for this report, without whom we wouldn't be able to provide such a wide array of analysis and data on UK legal services. So I'd now like to hand over to James Palmer, partner Herbert Smith Freehills, as the next speaker. And I'd like just to say thank you, James, for your chairmanship of the Legal Services Group and the contribution that you make to the work of the City UK in this regard, and indeed across the organisation. You're particularly generous with your time, and we're really grateful for all the contributions you make not just to our Legal Services Group and work, but to some of our other very senior groups. So James Palmer, over to you. Thanks so much.
Thank you very much indeed, Emma, for your kind comments, and good morning, everyone. As Emma mentioned, I'm James Palmer. I'm a partner at Herbert Smith Freehills and chair the City UK's Legal Services Group. The Legal Services Group is the legal sector's senior practitioner body comprised of members of the City UK, which brings together solicitors, the bar, in-house counsel, and several legal professional bodies, as well as other parts of the sector. I think this sector breadth makes it particularly well placed as a forum for the discussion of key law and legal services issues which impact on the international competitiveness of the UK legal services sector, and indeed on other key issues for the sector. We seek to take a view from across the legal sector and to focus in particular on long-term competitiveness, as I've just alluded to, and the wider legal system in the UK, but also on how an effective legal sector can further build trust and fairness for all in our societies. And I think we've worked very hard to try to focus on that, what one might call our purpose as a sector, which we should not lose sight of. The Legal Services Group has led the drafting of many of the City UK's written responses to government in 2021, including on judicial review reform, the Law Commission's project on corporate criminal liability, the Home Office's legislation to counter state threats, as well as overseeing the corporate governance section of the response to the BEI's Restoring Trust in Audit and Corporate Governance consultation. Another core part of the group's work is to work with stakeholders on the production of this annual report. Our report has become an important one-stop resource that brings together data from a wide array of sources to highlight how legal services make a really significant contribution to the UK economy, as well as its other contributions, and continue to provide the foundation upon which this country is able to thrive as a world-leading financial and business centre. It has become widely used in core briefings for ministers, the judiciary and others, and is recognised as among the leading resources for information related to the UK's legal services sector. Can I please pass my thanks to all of those who've contributed to its production from within the City UK's membership and beyond, and also in particular to acknowledge the great work of the City UK's own team who worked on this, pulling together the information, in particular Scott Devine, who leads that work and puts a huge amount of effort into it and produces what I think is a very, very valuable and accessible document. So thank you. The sector's economic impact is felt across the length and breadth of the country. It contributes 1.5% or close to 30 billion of UK gross value added. It employs more than 365,000 people, and very importantly, 2/3 of those based outside London. And despite facing the strong headwinds of the pandemic, UK legal services posted an impressive trade surplus of more than £5.5 billion in 2020. That is a major contribution to the UK's exports. While this year's report once again demonstrates the strength and resilience of the sector, the City UK is aware that as a sector we face challenges as well as opportunities in the future. We cannot be complacent, and indeed we are not, about the way in which other jurisdictions are seeking to improve their justice systems and become more competitive. And while both the courts and the sector have adapted well in order to be able to operate during the global pandemic, I would say superbly in terms of speed of response, they've got to maintain and build on this momentum to retain their cutting edge and really ensure that we're providing the best legal services, the best justice system that there is. The City UK's future vision for the financial and related professional services industry can only be delivered through an effective and strategic partnership with government and other stakeholders. Emma has already mentioned the importance of our strong and supportive working relationship with the judiciary and with the Ministry of Justice, which we value highly. Last year, during this event, I briefly mentioned that government rhetoric around the legal sector, lawyers and the judiciary had at times been less than supportive, and that questions have been raised about this government's commitment to the rule of law, both here in the UK and also internationally. 12 months later, I stand here and I think it is fair to say that questions are still being raised in this area, and that the City UK is watching developments around judicial review and the review of the Human Rights Act very closely. We know that as a lawyer, Lord Wolfson is deeply committed to the rule of law. That has been palpable in our dealings with him. We also know that he understands that the UK's law and legal services are a crucial national asset and a core element of this nation's future prospects. We look forward to continuing to work with Lord Wolfson and the new Lord Chancellor to ensure the UK legal services sector remains at the forefront of global developments in law, and that its value to the wider economy and society is understood and acknowledged in government and in their future policy decisions. In addition to the work of the Legal Services Group this year, which I outlined already, the group also ensured that the City UK's 2021 budget and spending review submission, our key submission to Treasury in relation to spending, made calls for additional funding for the judiciary and the courts to be prioritised. We really focused on that. We were delighted to see the government increase spending on justice and hope that this crucial investment in the judiciary and the courts continues, because it's very fundamental. With that, I'm going to pass back to Emma to welcome our first speaker, the Chancellor of the High Court, Sir Julian Flaux.
Thanks so much, James. Thank you for those remarks. And I'd like to now introduce our next speaker, the Chancellor of the High Court, the Right Honourable Sir Julian Flaux. Sir Julian, thank you so much for being with us. We're delighted to have you here. Sir Julian was appointed as Chancellor in February of this year, and in that role he is President of the Chancery Division of the High Court and Vice President of the Court of Protection. And Sir Julian and his office contribute much to the judicial section in our legal services report, for which we are extremely grateful. And we're delighted to maintain such a strong dialogue with Sir Julian and his office, and indeed the senior judiciary in this country. And this is evidenced by Sir Julian joining us today and continuing that excellent relationship with his office. So it's a great pleasure and honour, Sir Julian, to hand over to you. Thanks so much for being with us.
Well, thank you very much indeed to City UK for inviting me to speak to you this morning. As the Chancellor of the High Court, I'm the head of the Chancery Division, but I also have responsibility for the day-to-day operation of the Business and Property Courts, both in the Rolls Building in London and at 7 regional court centres, including Liverpool, which is where I'm speaking to you from today. I know Lord Wolfson will be pleased to hear that. The Business and Property Courts comprise the Chancery Division and the Commercial Court and the Technology and Construction Court, the latter 2 courts being part of the Queen's Bench Division. The Chancery Division deals with a wide range of business and financial disputes, as well as company law, insolvency, intellectual property, competition, trusts and property disputes. So there is a degree of overlap between the work of the division and that of the other business and property courts, specifically the Commercial Court. The Chancery Division and the Commercial Court also operate a species of joint venture in the form of the Financial List, which utilises judges with experience of relevant financial markets to determine high-value financial disputes and disputes where guidance from the court is required. The number of cases in the Financial List has been on the increase in the last year or two, so that we are confident that the Financial List is proving to be of assistance to the city and to the financial world more generally. The business and property courts are a very important part of the UK legal system. They underpin the position of English law and jurisdiction as the global business law and jurisdiction of choice. Over the last year, there have been extended celebrations of the 125th anniversary of the founding of the Commercial Court in 1895, which I'm sure many of you have heard about. So I do not propose to repeat everything that has been said about the Commercial Court and its foundation, but I did just want to say a few words about one of the great commercial judges who preceded the setting up of the court by more than a century, and who typifies really the long-standing connections between the city and the courts. That is to say, Lord Mansfield, who was the Chief Justice of the King's Bench from 1756 until 1788. He's generally recognised as the founder of modern commercial law, of whom it has been said that he, quotes, enfolded into the ancient common law of England the customs and usages of the merchants and industrialists, unquote. He was particularly interested in commercial law, but was also concerned, as we are today, in what we would now call the rule of law, because the business and property courts are merely one part of our legal system. Lord Mansfield said that the great object in every branch of the law, but especially in mercantile law, is certainty. And he constructed what one commentator has called a settled system of principles and rules upon which merchants, lawyers, and judges could rely. It seems to me that one way in which the business and property courts can retain their preeminent position is by endeavouring to remain true to those principles which were established now nearly 250 years ago. Enough of the history, I feel. What the business and property courts have been at the forefront of innovations in dispute resolution, which are designed to reduce the cost and to increase the speed of specialist civil litigation. The proactive approach to case management, which is one of the hallmarks of these courts, in fact, long precedes the civil procedure rules, which came into force in 1999. I remember as a young barrister in the 1980s appearing before judges of the commercial court, such as Robert Goff and Tom Bingham, who would ensure that parties focused on the critical issues in the case and that disclosure and witness and expert evidence were limited accordingly. The case management conference, which is now a feature of all civil litigation, was really first employed by those innovative judges in the commercial court 30 or 40 years ago. Nevertheless, despite the best efforts of the judges, in time, disclosure, and in particular electronic disclosure, got out of hand. And it was in response to the concerns expressed by users of our courts about the burdens of disclosure in complex litigation that the business and property courts adopted the disclosure pilot some 3 years ago. Now, I know it's not been received with universal approval and acceptance, but it has led to a change of culture so that disclosure is now focused on the issues in the case where such disclosure is required to resolve the issues fairly, rather than it simply being a wide-ranging free-for-all. The pilot has been extended to the end of December 2022, and it was the subject of further refinements following feedback from the legal professions and professional associations. These included the creation of a separate regime for less complex claims, a simplified version of the disclosure review document, and some modifications designed to simplify the process for agreeing lists of issues for disclosure. One of the other issues which arose in trials in the business and property courts was the extent to which witness statements had ceased to be statements of the direct evidence of a particular witness and had become discursive narratives going through all the documents in the case and expressing opinions in ways which were not appropriate for witnesses. Quite apart from the fact that that went beyond what was legitimate as evidence, it would often lead to lengthy cross-examination, which may have gratified counsel and their clients. But speaking for myself, as a former judge of the commercial court, it was really of little use to the judge who had to decide the case. It was to address those shortcomings that a working group recommended what is now Practice Direction 57AC on witness statements, which is designed to ensure that these are limited to the direct evidence a witness can give in relation to the issues in dispute. At the outset of the pandemic, the business and property courts had to adapt swiftly to remote working, which we did achieve almost seamlessly. On the Wednesday before the first lockdown in March last year, all cases in the Rolls building were being heard in person. By the Friday, they were nearly all remote, using a number of different platforms, initially Skype for Business and then latterly Teams. Very few cases were adjourned, and if they were, it was at the request of the parties rather than because, for example, a judge was not available. We achieved what was in effect business as usual, and in doing so, we were almost unique amongst commercial and business courts internationally, many of which only conducted urgent or emergency cases, certainly in the first few months of the pandemic. The flexibility of approach of the business and property courts and our ability to provide a full service to international clients through the hard work of judges, practitioners and court staff alike undoubtedly enhanced our reputation as a prime centre for international dispute resolution. However, as I keep saying, we cannot afford to be complacent and to rest on our laurels. It seems to me that we must learn from some of the new ways of working developed at speed during the pandemic. For example, in relation to shorter procedural hearings or hearings without live witness evidence, which are for half a day or less, the default position in the business and property courts is now that they're heard remotely, always subject to judicial discretion. Obviously, there will be cases where either the parties or the judge consider that a case management conference requires an in-person hearing. The example I always give is the hopefully rare case where the parties or their lawyers are disregarding the overriding objective and the need to collaborate with each other and the court, and instead are engaging in the litigation equivalent of trench warfare. As an in-person hearing will often instill some common sense, especially if it's about 9 o'clock in the morning. However, in the vast run of cases, we found that conducting case management hearings remotely is quicker and more cost-effective. Subject always, of course, to the restrictions which are being reimposed, but really looking forward to the time when the pandemic is no longer with us. The position with regard to trials is somewhat different. As long as COVID is prevalent, it's undoubtedly the case that we will continue to have witnesses giving evidence remotely. And I suspect that except in the case of critical witnesses, or those, for example, whose credibility is in issue, the giving of evidence over a remote platform or a video link will become a regular feature of business and property litigation in the future. However, the majority view amongst judges and practitioners alike is that critical witnesses, for example, those whose credibility is an issue, should give their evidence in person in the courtroom. There is a concern that when a witness gives evidence remotely, there's a disconnect between the witness and the court, and less sense on the witness's part of the significance of giving evidence on oath. The importance of what one of the Scottish judges, Lord Pentland, calls the court as place, a neutral location where disputes are resolved, cannot, in my view, be overemphasized. One aspect of the way we've learnt to work over the last 21 months is here to stay, and that is the hybrid hearing, where the judge and advocates and critical witnesses are in court, but others, such as clients and media or members of the public, can participate remotely from wherever they happen to be. The ability to offer this flexibility should enhance the international reputation of our business and property courts. However, our ability to conduct both hybrid and remote hearings effectively depends upon reliable and robust technology in our courtrooms and court buildings. And that requires commitment and investment from the court service and government generally, not just in the technology, but in the staff who are suitably qualified to operate the technology and to resolve problems which inevitably occur. And I believe that our business and property courts have the procedures in place and a cadre of high quality judges and practitioners to ensure that we retain our preeminent position as a jurisdiction of choice for international dispute resolution. But without that continued investment in the most up-to-date technology and the appropriate personnel to operate it, that position may be at risk. We cannot afford to lose out to other jurisdictions which have set themselves up as our rivals because they're ahead of us in technological advances. We must continue to lead the way. Thank you very much for listening to me this morning.
Thank you so much, Right Honourable Sir Julian Flaux. We're delighted to have you here with us this morning. Thank you for taking the time to speak to us, and thank you for reminding us that we live in a very competitive world, and although the UK remains the jurisdiction of choice for international legal dispute resolution, we want to stay in that position, and we have to move and innovate in order to do that. So thank you so much. That was hugely valuable. It's my great pleasure to now introduce Lord Wolfson, the Parliamentary Under Secretary of State at the Ministry of Justice. Lord Wolfson was appointed as an MOJ Minister this time last year, December 2020. And in that time, Lord Wolfson has forged a strong working relationship with the TheCityUK's Legal Services Group, and has engaged with the members of that group in a very open and collaborative manner. So thank you so much for that. We're very, very grateful. And Lord Wolfson, we particularly appreciate how deep your understanding is of the work that our members do, given that your background is the same background. You were very recently practicing at One Essex Court, and you've been involved in many major banking and commercial disputes in recent years. And your practice extended over a broad range of commercial law, both in litigation and in international arbitration. So we're delighted to have you with us today, and we're delighted that you're a minister at the MOJ. So thanks so much for being with us, and over to you.
Well, thank you very much, Emma. Thank you also, James, for your kind words earlier. It's a pleasure to be here. It's a particular pleasure to follow the Chancellor, especially as he's speaking from Liverpool, which is where I come from. I'm just wondering now whether the matter which the Chancellor is hearing is going to go part heard until at least 3 p.m. on Saturday afternoon when we play Aston Villa. But coming back to this morning, I'm delighted to be here at the launch of the 10th edition of the TheCityUK's report, Legal Excellence, Internationally Renowned UK Legal Services 2021. And throughout the last decade, the sector has demonstrated immense growth. Revenues have doubled, legal exports have increased, and I'm absolutely confident that this upward trend will continue. Before I get into the meat of what I say, I should apologise for the fact that the Lord Chancellor, Deputy Prime Minister himself can't be here this morning, and I just hope that I'm a sufficiently decent substitute. So thanks and congratulations then to the TheCityUK. Yet again, we've been given an excellent report which provides a comprehensive overview of the vital contribution that the legal sector makes to the UK economy. This report is a one-stop shop for really useful information, and I and my team at the MOJ refer to it on a regular basis. And what jumps out at me from this report is that despite a very challenging period in 2021, the sector continues to thrive, and that's thriving domestically and also internationally. And there's no doubt that since the publication of last year's report, the two features that the legal sector has really demonstrated are resilience and also adaptability. And so the legal sector hasn't just survived. You've embraced the challenges that have been presented, and you've taken the opportunity to accelerate change. And therefore, I really must thank everybody for the remarkable work which has been done during the pandemic. And let me reflect on the strength of the legal sector and why that strength is there. I'd also then like to say a couple of words about how we really have to work together to preserve, as James and the Chancellor said, the UK status as a destination of choice for international legal services. So starting with legal services and the UK economy, the report, as one would expect, highlights the central role that legal services play as an enabler of the economy. I recently did a mission to the Gulf, to Qatar, Dubai, and Israel. I'll say a word about that later on. And an analogy I gave out there, because there's so much construction going on, is that legal services and the rule of law are like the cement in a building. You don't see the cement once the building is built. But if there's no cement, there won't be a building. It really will just fall down. And legal services and the legal sector are like that cement when it comes to our economy, with a contribution to the UK economy of £24 billion in 2019, and no doubt higher revenues thereafter. That cement really is worth its weight in gold. And there's no doubt, I think, that the legal sector will prove central to the continued resilience of the UK economy and its future success. The legal sector contributed 1.2% of UK gross value in that year. It posted an impressive trade surplus of £5.6 billion in 2020, and that's despite the challenges that year held for the legal sector and indeed for everyone else. And there's no doubt, therefore, that whether it's the provision of legal services, the application of English law, the use of our world-class dispute resolution services, the UK really is a global centre of excellence. And people turn to us in the UK and in this sector because they know that the legal profession here, in all its formulations, will go above and beyond to provide a world-class service. They know that English law will respond to their business needs, and they know that when they get a decision from a UK court, even, or should I say especially, if it's sitting in Liverpool, that is a global guarantee of impartiality, integrity, and worldwide enforceability. And so I'm really honoured to have this role in the MOJ to represent, in that sense, the UK legal services sector, to promote it internationally, as I have been doing, and to support your work in attracting global business to the UK. And let me use this moment also to thank those on this meeting who joined me on the recent trade mission to the Middle East. It was a real pleasure to showcase the excellence of the UK legal sector, to highlight the strength of English law, and to work together as a real united team towards the shared growth of growing exports in the UAE, in Qatar, and in Israel. And although I had very good meetings with my government counterparts, I also had excellent meetings with a wide range of businesses, with lawyers, and indeed with others. And there was a thread that ran through all of those engagements, from meetings with the CEO and judges of the Qatar International Court and Dispute Resolution Centre, to law and business students at the University of Dubai, from the President and Supreme Court Justices of the Supreme Court of Israel, to local law firms and law tech companies. And that thread was the importance of building and investing in relationships and hearing firsthand the challenges which can be overcome and the enormous opportunities which exist not just for UK legal services, but for mutual prosperity. And as the year turns and we see 2022 arriving, this government will continue to support you in the promotion of UK legal services, English law, and the UK as a global dispute resolution centre. Last year, 77% of commercial court cases involved at least one party from outside England and Wales, and additionally, over 43,000 disputes were resolved by arbitration, mediation, and conciliation. So there is both the traditional commercial court litigious work coming to London. There's also the scope to resolve disputes in a different way. But we can't be complacent. None of that is guaranteed. It has to be earned and continually earned. And we want to make sure that the UK remains at the forefront not only of global litigation, but also global international arbitration. And there's no doubt that the Arbitration Act 1996 played a really important role in making London a hub for international arbitration. But given the rapid pace of change in that sector, given emerging competition from other arbitration centres, we want to make sure that the Act remains a market leader. And that's why I really welcome the Law Commission's review of the Arbitration Act 1996. It's now the 25th anniversary of that piece of legislation. It's a good time to give it a dust off, to make sure that it really remains absolutely market leading and effective. I don't believe in change for change's sake, but I do believe that we must really remain on the front foot, to use a cricketing metaphor, despite the news from the Gabba. We must remain on the front foot to exploit every opportunity to enable parties to come to London to arbitrate and make sure that we remain the host to institutions which absolutely represent the gold standard in international arbitration. English law, we believe, is the current world leader for business. We want to make sure that it continues to respond to innovation and anticipates emerging business needs. And again, I must thank the Law Commission for its continuous work on the intersection of law and emerging technologies. Their recent paper on smart contracts is a leap forward for the future of decentralized data, and it's very timely. You may have seen that about a month ago, the World Economic Forum reported that distributed ledger technology and smart contracts are poised to disrupt $867 trillion in traditional markets. That's a sum so huge, it's hard even to comprehend. And therefore, it's critical that the UK remains at the forefront of this rapidly evolving field. And therefore, I couldn't agree more with the recent remarks of the Master of the Rolls, Sir Geoffrey Voss, that we must provide the foundation for these emerging technologies to flourish. And the Law Commission looked at our law, assessed it with the help of contributions from a number of people at this meeting, and provided legal certainty for those looking to use smart contracts. And what we've shown, and we've shown the rest of the world this, that English law can and will accommodate the technologies of the future. I say the UK, and I do mean the UK and not just London. We can't forget about the strengths of the UK regions. There is expertise across the whole of our country. And the City UK report refers to Scottish lawyers and their expertise in energy law, to the emergence of Belfast as a leading centre for legal innovation, which hosts law techs such as Axiom and iManage. And of course, there are numerous examples of absolutely first-class work that lawyers outside London are undertaking. And as a government, this is central to our levelling up agenda. The harnessing of the UK's regional strengths is vital, we believe, in ensuring the entire country's continued prominence in and attractiveness to global trade and investment. And we must consider how we can increase the presence of and access to high quality legal services across the entire country. Until fairly recently, we had the rather odd scenario that Queen's Bench Division judges would leave London to go on circuit. And as the Commercial Court is part of the Queen's Bench Division, Commercial Court judges would leave London to go on circuit, but they wouldn't be hearing commercial cases out on circuit. They'd be hearing criminal cases alone out on circuit. So here's to progress that Commercial Court judges now frequently do venture out of London to hear commercial court cases. We have the Chancellor himself today in Liverpool. And of course, we now have the Circuit Commercial Court as well, which deploy judges across the 7 business property court centres outside London. All those are great innovations. They are a great foundation to build on. And I do believe that ever greater availability of these kinds of services across the country would benefit business greatly right across the UK. Looking more internationally, I'm aware that access to priority markets is critical. As an independent trading partner, the UK continues to build trading relationships with key partners across the globe. The services sector is a huge part of that, and both I and this department are focused on the crucial provision of legal services and its position to facilitate trade and investment. In the last 12 months, with help again from many at this meeting, we've used trade negotiations and engagement to advance legal services interests in relationships with the EU, EEA, EFTA nations, Australia, and New Zealand. And we're continuing to build on that. We are beginning negotiations with Mexico, Canada, and indeed India, which is perhaps the largest market that the UK is committed to negotiating a trade deal with. And for UK legal services, we aim to double the overall value of UK-India trade by the end of this decade. And we want to deepen cooperation on legal services between our nations. So both nationally and internationally, we are focused on the continued strength and development of the UK legal sector. As City UK notes in its report, this is really a national asset, which this government is committed to supporting and promoting on the world stage. And I want to ensure that the strength of the UK legal sector is seen and treasured by the wider business sector here in the UK and indeed across the world. And the single most important way we're going to do that is to work together. Collaboration is what will allow us to stay ahead of the competition and remain a world-leading centre of legal excellence. Thank you again for affording me the opportunity to say these words this morning. Now back to the studio, so to speak, and to you, Emma.
Thank you so much, Lord Wolfson. Thank you for those remarks. And without further ado, I will hand over to James. And thank you, Lord Wolfson, for agreeing to be on our distinguished panel as well. And James will come in now and introduce our panel for the panel debate. And although we don't have much time, I would say this is the audience's chance to get involved. And if you could put your questions in the Q&A function and make sure you include your name and organisation. James, over to you.
Thanks very much, Emma, and thanks very much also, Lord Wolfson. I'm going to turn straight to introducing our two other panelists for this discussion, who are both members of the City UK's Legal Services Group. Farmida B, who is Chair Europe, Middle East and Asia for Norton Rose Fulbright. Welcome, Farmida. And Karen Davies, the Global Chair at Ashurst LLP. And welcome, Karen. This is your first event you've appeared at with us since your election as the Global Chair of Ashurst, and congratulations on that. I'm going to, as I said, encourage questions from the audience, but we've got other issues we can talk about while we wait for those to come in. And I'm going to start just by trying to draw out a few thoughts from our members, and therefore from Farmida and from Karen, on some of the reflections and perspectives coming from COVID. We've heard the Chancellor and Lord Wolfson both talk about changes to the way we work, adaptation, and so on. But I wonder if, first of all, Farmida, you might want to comment on some of the trends and issues you think have come out, some of the lessons that have come out of the pandemic, and things that you see as changes that have been accelerated that may be here to stay, or other comments on the impact of the pandemic.
Thanks, James, and hello, everyone. Well, I think the biggest change, of course, that we've all faced is people being able to work from home. And that, I think, has been welcomed by some people, but it's causing an issue in terms of making sure that we train juniors and trainees in particular, and trying to find a balance between the flexibility that is attractive to some people and making sure that the juniors are given the level of training and input that they deserve is something that we're all wrestling with. And I think the other big development we've seen is the speed with which I think even Luddites like me have had to get used to technology. I think people talk about us having progressed 10 years over what was effectively a weekend when we went into lockdown back in March 2020. So I think those are probably the two biggest changes that we've seen in terms of how we work. But I think we've also seen other impacts. So, for example, a lot of the worries that we had about the consequences of Brexit and how we did business in Europe, some of that to some extent has been mitigated by the fact that we've been able to do quite a lot of things remotely. And so those issues of, can you turn up and give advice in the European Union, those have been less impacted than we had expected. So it's an evolving picture, but I completely acknowledge what Lord Wolfson said about the resilience and adaptability of law firms. I think we've shown that we are much more that than we had possibly anticipated. We, I think, thought of ourselves as quite conservative and slow to change, and actually we've been able to adapt to the necessity that we face.
Thank you, Farmida. Karen, what would you like to add, and what are your observations on those issues?
Yeah, sure. I would just echo, I think, everything that Farmida has said. I think for us, it's the hybrid, flexible way of working is here to stay. Prior to yesterday, we were operating a 60-40 model and encouraging people to come into the office 3 days a week. And essentially, I think people want that to stay post-COVID. And we're being very flexible on that. So if we have people that are in the office, say 5 or 6 days, then they have the entitlement not to come in the following week, and they want that flexibility. So that's the key thing I think we're seeing. The other thing as well is I think it's caused us to think about our office footprint and our layouts. Over the last year, we've acted quite nimbly to reduce our footprint by about 10%. But what we're hearing from our staff now is that when they do come in, they don't want to be in their cellular offices anymore. They want collaborative workspaces. They want an area where they can sit and work together, but also have quiet spaces where they can go off and do perhaps drafting or just confidential calls. So it's causing us to think, I think, also about our office layout and footprint. And as Farmida was saying, kind of the increased use of technology is obviously here to stay. And I think who would have thought that we could do kind of complex cases and takeovers from home, but we have, and I think now clients are increasingly demanding those efficiencies that we've learned through the pandemic to be carried forward.
Thank you. I'm going to turn to a different issue and bring in Lord Wolfson. I mean, one of the main functions of our report is to demonstrate and to the extent possible quantify the value of the sector. And as part of that, we've highlighted the significant role the courts play in the value proposition. And I think that in the practitioner side, the private practice side, the law firm side, we fully understand that. And I will just add that clearly the other side of investment in building international use of English law, which is not, I think, so well understood, has been the billions of pounds invested in building global networks by international law firms based out of London, which because they go through profit and loss accounts and just hit profits in a year, don't get seen as the investment they are actually. But in relation to the courts, Lord Wolfson, which we've engaged with you on and you've been very open to us about, one of the challenges that I see is about understanding of the role of law, and we were, as you know, delighted with the improvement in the allocation to the MOJ for the courts in the budget, and that was a reversal of a pattern we'd seen before, and so we strongly welcome that. But I'm not looking for a sort of glib answer on, well, or to tie you as to future budget commitments, which we know we can't do. But do you see a challenge in a more complex world with more complex issues being addressed by government all over the place in actually articulating and explaining in other parts of government outside MOJ why this is so fundamentally important and how we can support it? And any thoughts on what we can do to help you and others who deeply believe in this to support those outcomes?
Well, I do think that it is recognised across government that not only is our justice system, I think the envy of the world, and in terms of its reputation and integrity and its global reach, and also the quality of our judiciary. It's also recognised, I think, that, as I said in my remarks, the rule of law and the legal system is not a nice to have. It's not something which is separate from a flourishing economy and international investment. It's critical for a flourishing economy and international investment, because without a strong legal basis, people won't invest. If people can't vindicate their legal rights, they won't come to this country. I mean, you're right to say that the spending review, which you just completed, was a very good one for the MOJ. I mean, we're now investing more than £1 billion across the court system to increase capacity and improve efficiency and to tackle the backlogs, which have certainly grown up over the COVID period. But there's no doubt that the justice system in 2030, 2035, I think will be different to the justice system in 2020. Every other sector of our economy has seen accelerated change because of the pandemic. Things which would have happened now more quickly. I've no doubt the justice system is going to be the same. I mean, I personally find when I chat to people across government that is recognised. How can you help? Well, I mean, frankly, by doing what you're doing. I mean, keeping plugging away, producing reports like the one you've produced, talking to people across government, not just in the MOJ, but also in BEIS and the Treasury and other departments, because I don't want justice to be siloed, so to speak, within the Ministry of Justice. A justice system, as I say, underpins, I would say, a civilization and a proper civilized society, but it certainly underpins all the business and industry departments within government.
Thank you. And I will just emphasize your comment about justice underpinning society. I think it's very easy for us to focus on the economic benefits, which don't always resonate with some out in the public. And I think the underpinning of society, which I personally deeply agree with, and I can see the other panelists nodding, I think is something we need to focus on more. Thank you for that. I'm going to again just move on to another issue. As Farmida knows, having been very closely involved in it, and Karen, you'll be aware, the Legal Services Group has put a lot of focus on reputation and reputation of the sector and trust in the sector, and what I'd call and we set up a reputation subgroup focused on what I've called the social value of law, which I think is another way of saying its purpose. And it goes back to that point about the law underpinning society as well as economic performance and success. And as part of that, what we're trying to do is not replace work done elsewhere, because we're in many respects a convening body on some of these issues across the sector, but a lot of work is being done on diversity and inclusivity, and our report draws out some of the themes there with some of the scope for further improvement, but some of the initiatives that have been done. But there's clearly further work that needs to be done. You know, Farmida and Karen, you're both leaders in the industry. This year's report shows that the UK's top 100 firms, and I'm just going to focus on gender, but we should talk about race or other issues of inclusion, social mobility as well. The top 100 firms, only 31% of partners and 25% of equity partners are women. Yes, there are a lot of initiatives coming out, which is great, but what sort of initiatives do you think have worked or are working and are most important to ensure we're more successful? And what other observations have you got on how we ensure inclusivity, both for women, but also for others who are not majorities and are sometimes easily overlooked through unconscious biases in particular? Where should we be focused? Karen, can I come to you first on that?
Yes, absolutely, James. I think it's a very important issue. I think we've worked out, I think what gets measured gets done. So we've set ourselves very ambitious targets in September, not only for gender this time, but also, as you mentioned, across ethnicity and social mobility groups. And I think what I've learned, it's important to entrench that way of thinking at all levels within the organisation. It's something that we need to not only educate partners and leaders on, but everyone throughout the team, in that we need to embrace this way of working. And we have various support groups throughout the business. But the way of, I think the best way that we've achieved it through women and social mobility is through just informal mentoring. Is having informal mentor programs where people can speak to leaders and say, I need help. What can I do to get to this certain position? And I think that's the projects that we've seen that I think internally has made the most success.
Thank you. And Farmida.
I think targets, as Karen says, make a huge difference. So I think for a long time we all sort of wrung our hands and said, wouldn't it be nice if we had more women? We actually only ever focused on women. And we didn't change things very much until we started having targets. And then we had to put processes in place in order to achieve those targets. I think what worked particularly well for us was picking out the women that we thought were high potential and having a specific program to help them into the partnership. And that really did make a difference. I was always frustrated in the city that we saw diversity purely through a gender lens. And the thing that's changed it is the George Floyd killing in the US, which had a remarkable impact in the UK and in the city in particular. And as a result of that, we now have, I think many of us have race as well. And we're using basically the same things that work for gender to try and create a more level playing field around race. And I'm confident that that is going to work. Social mobility has become increasingly important, and rightly so. I think actually city law firms are probably more socially diverse than people imagine, and I think we just need to get some of those metrics and be open about it. But we are now very focused on making sure that we attract people from a broad range of backgrounds. One of my frustrations is that our old diversity committee is now sort of attracting more and more letters. And actually, this is really about fairness and being very clear with team leaders and groups to make sure that they're putting forward the most able people for, I mean, I'm focusing on partnership, but of course it works all the way through the firm. I think people need to be challenged and pushed and perhaps out of their comfort zones. So things are changing very much for the better, but I don't think we can be complacent. I'm worried about the impact of the pandemic, both on the numbers of women and on the effect that it has on ethnic minorities, because I can see some negative effects of that already. So I think we have to push forward. The other additional comment I'd make is around sustainability. I think that is having a big impact both on what our clients want and on how we do our business. And all of these things are really given a massive boost by client demands. So now we have lots of clients wanting to know what our metrics are around both diversity and sustainability, and that will drive change.
Thank you both. And Lord Wolfson, do you want to just comment briefly on how you see this? And I know there are initiatives within the judiciary, but more broadly in this area.
Well, I mean, diversity is critical. Not only do we have policies on that within the MOJ, but I mean, on a personal basis, one of the positions I've taken up is to be a patron of an organisation called Big Voice, which really focuses on social mobility. And Karen's absolutely right. We need to look at diversity in its diverse nature. There are all sorts of facets to diversity. I think sometimes the legal profession actually, I think as Karen says, doesn't blow its own trumpet loud enough. I think a lot more is being done than people know about. And I think the legal profession has a good story to tell, but there's certainly more to be done. I think the impact of the market here is really essential. I mean, as was said, more and more clients, before instructing lawyers and law firms, want to know what are your diversity statistics, and market-led initiatives often prove to be the most enduring. So that's a very welcome development, I think.
Thank you very much. Look, I'll just make a comment on it. I mean, my own observation on it, having had a leadership role I've now moved on from, but was how lawyers are very, very good at constantly looking at new ways of doing things if they think they're going to help serve clients better, which is one of the strengths of the sector. They're often less quick to look at ways of changing how they run their own organizations better, and people just make assumptions about how things work. And I think how we find ways of getting people to be constantly curious and open to revisiting the assumptions they've made and coping with maybe having not got things as perfectly as they would like to think is and the assumptions people make about what is quality, what is high flying, what are the things we're looking for, and what are the structures we're putting in place to help make those work. On that, I'm going to thank our panelists very much indeed for joining us. Thank you, Lord Wolfson, also for your comments earlier, and thanks also to Sir Julian, Farmida and Karen. Thank you. I'm particularly grateful to you both taking time out also to participate. And with that, I'm going to hand back to Emma.
Thank you so much, James, and thank you to our distinguished panel, and thanks again to Lord Wolfson and indeed Sir Julian Flaux, Chancellor of the High Court. We've had a fantastically wide-ranging and diverse debate, and thank you for that piece there on diversity and inclusion, which I think is highly relevant. I'd like to thank everybody who tuned in for the launch of this report, and I'd encourage you to read the report in full and to use it in your advocacy to make sure that the highest levels of government, and we know we have Lord Wolfson on board, but we need others on board too across the government to appreciate the strength of the legal services sector and the contribution it makes to the economy up and down the country and indeed to our society. So thanks again and have a good day. Thank you very much.